Have you ever heard financial terms or concepts and thought, this doesn't make sense? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to Make It Make Sense, the podcast powered by Acclaim Federal Credit Union, where we break down the world of financial literacy. At Acclaim, our goal is to connect you to financial wellness, and this podcast is here to lead the way. Whether you're just starting out or looking to sharpen your financial skills, we've got you covered. Let's make it make sense together. Here's your host, Christy Smith.
Welcome to episode 4 of Make It Make Sense, or we want to make sense of financial literacy. Today, we have the privilege of 2 guests. We have Shirley Senn and Jonathan Taylor. We are going to call him JT because he has told me that's okay. Mm-hmm. Today, we're going to talk about financial freedom and breaking the chains of domestic abuse.
Thank you very much, Christy. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you, Christy.
I'll let one of you or both of you just share a little bit about your mission.
Yeah, so FiSafe, which has been recently, I guess, branded with the new initiative that Shirley and I are founders of. It has a few different meanings. FiSafe being, financial safety for all. We really think it's important to focus on the financial abuse aspects of domestic violence. There are a lot of threads of control around domestic violence, but our feelings and our contention is that the financial abuse aspects are some of the thickest threads to cut. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. But I've been doing this work now for 3 years. It started, I was the CEO of CU Soul, which is a 4 credit union owned QSO based in Albuquerque, and they had an initiative and still do called CU Safe in Albuquerque. And that was really the reason why I took that job, because my mother's a social worker. I have 3 daughters, and my oldest is 27, and she herself is a survivor of domestic violence from her ex-stepdad. And she moved up and lived with me full-time when she was 12. And I didn't know this until she was 19. And so that was the fire in my belly. It certainly explained why her mother didn't fight her coming up here and actually supported her coming up here, which was very difficult for her at the time and also very brave. So that was the fire in my belly for taking on this work. And having been in the credit union space for 18 years now, I knew that credit unions had superpowers around this when it comes to combating the financial abuse aspects. We can't help every aspect, but we can help this for sure. And so it started there. And as we brought the awareness out into the marketplace, I was very lucky early on to be introduced to the likes of Susan Mitchell and some of the other folks. And I was actually at the Underground event last year, right, Shirley? Was it was only a year ago. Isn't that crazy? I feel like I've known Shirley for decades in the best way possible, even though we've only been working together for a short amount of time. But that was where I met Shirley last year. And so she decided to join the fight, and we've been working together on the evolution of the program and what is FiSafe today.
That's fantastic. Shirley, I'll go ahead and let you.
No, I just got a little to add on to that, and the fact that I think, I love this industry. I love this movement. I've been in it for 33 years. That's hard to believe. And there's been so much that has transpired over those decades in terms of just what credit unions were and where they're at today. And I think this has been a topic that gets shoved under the carpet a lot. The sorority I was in college, our project was domestic violence and abuse, and working with the centers in particular. So that was when I was 19. So it became a part of just really what I wanted to do in terms of my volunteer work. But seeing how things have just gotten worse, not better, when you really look at what are some of the underlying problems And so, like I said, some of them have just not been dealt with. And when we look at the fact that depending on what study you may look at, 94 to 99% of domestic abuse survivors also have been exposed or experienced economic and financial abuse. So, I mean, we're basically talking about almost 100%. And so when I think about, well, what are our solutions? And that's really what got me interested in what JT and some others that he was working with at the time, was just the fact that going around trying to talk to credit unions about this, none of them had a formalized program. None of them had products and services and counseling that was specific to helping those unique needs. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but this is where, we're talking about sensitivity in terms of how do we help them? We have to help them where they're at, and we have to help them in the context of what's best for them. And so not everything that credit unions offer may be in their best interest or the timing that we think it would be. So this has been a real learning curve, I think, for a lot of us that have been getting involved in what we're doing here with FiSafe. So I'm really excited from the standpoint of, making sure that there are tools out there and help and support so that we can come together as a tribe, if you want to call it that, to make sure that that people can work with the domestic violence resource centers or, job centers, Dress for Success. So there's so many different partnerships that really come together succinctly to provide a solution for these women and sometimes men, but mostly vast majority of them, women, single mothers, and they have kids. So we're thinking about all of those items and specific issues. So, as we talk a little bit more about what FiSafe has to offer, part of what I'm out there is basically a call to action to, if credit unions are saying they want to do something, well, we're here. We're providing something. We're putting something together, for you to take that stand. So that's my challenge right now, is really getting credit unions to, put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And we want to help them do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a loss for words. I do think that it's a very taboo subject. It's 2025 and you can show your cracks now. You don't have to have everything put together, but yet I still think that there is a judgment or a little hesitation with this topic because there's a lot of things to consider. And so I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I'm just a cheerleader for you. I think that the credit union movement is perfect for what you're doing because I believe that we are advocates for our members. We're not just transactional banking, and that's why the credit unions shouldn't be taxed. Let me go ahead and throw that in there too.
Yes.
Because we are advocates for our communities, and that is different than the banking system. So again, I won't get on that soapbox. How does financial abuse play a role in domestic violence situations?
Yeah. Some of the most impactful ways that keep somebody from being able to break away, really. When you're thinking about, it's like the old saying, if you control the head, you control the body. Well, if you control the money, if you control the credit, and if you control the communication, it's all but impossible for somebody to break away. And so you think about, the statistic is that the average is 7 times in a cycle of a survivor trying to get away from an abuser and then going back. And a lot of people, that's a very frustrating number when you think about it. Oh my God. I mean, imagine, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are thinking about somebody that they have tried to help, and they're probably nodding their heads going, yep. And I watched 3 of those cycles, and it got to a point where I was just so frustrated. I was like, I can't do anymore. Me, myself, with so many of my female friends, it's predominantly a female issue, right? unfortunately. And 3-4 times you're like, gosh, I don't understand. Why can't you break away? Well, a big reason why that number is so high is because if you have to get away and you have no money and you have all of your accounts are controlled by your abuser and you've got no savings, you've got no ability to afford to break away. And I mean, it takes a lot of money to do that. But then on top of that, if your credit has been damaged, purposefully, then think about what you need credit for. Well, you need credit for a loan. Well, what else do you need credit for? You need credit for an apartment. What else do you need credit for? You need credit for auto insurance, for employment. Sometimes people pull credit. I mean, that credit score, unfortunately, is wrapped around all of the major decisions of our lives, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I say wrong, but it is what it is. So if you damage the credit, and my credit has been damaged purposefully before, and it can really hurt you for many, many years and make your life so much more expensive. So really it's empowering folks with options to free their funds and heal their credit so that they can get back on their feet. And I've never worked in an initiative in my entire career. And I've worked with some wonderful, wonderful charities. I mean, Special Olympics and Barbara Bush Children's Miracle Network. And these are all wonderful organizations that I absolutely adore and love. But I've never worked in anything before that resonates so strongly with every single person that we talk to. Because everybody we talk to, and Shirley can vouch for this, they're either a survivor themselves or they love somebody who is. And I always say top 3, either a parent or a parent figure, either a sibling or their spouse or significant other, or their child or one of the children in their lives. So just understanding how much this impacts our society and understanding that the thickest threads to cut in order to break away are the threads that we in the credit union space have the sharpest scissors to cut. So the good news is that everybody wants to try to help. Everybody has one piece of the solution, and it's our job at FiSafe to, I say, build the quilt, to put all of those pieces together so that we can create a path that is as smooth as possible for survivors to get all of as many threads as possible cut so they can break away, because we can't cut all of them. They are going to have to rip some of them away on their own, but to just snip enough so they can do the real hard work and be empowered to do that.
Yeah. Going back to the reality of the situation. And again, I love numbers because they really add impact to what we're talking about. And like JT was saying, 1 out of 3, if we look at just the 3 of us, if it was 3 females, 1 of the 3 of us has suffered domestic violence or sexual abuse, and 1 out of 2. So if we're looking at knows somebody that has been through that, those are pretty high statistics, to look around a room and think who is in this room that has suffered. And what can we do about that? And when you look at like he was saying, when you look at the statistics, I think it's around 75% of abusers say that they've stayed with their abusive partners because of economic abuse. They had nowhere to go. And so when you think about all the things that credit unions have been innovative about, and especially we've recently had these terms, you're talking about the tax status. We also, I think, need to continue to ensure that inclusion is also in these discussions, that inclusion is just that. It's including people in a process or something that will help them. And in this case, it's the financial inclusion that's so important of this entire process. And when we look at what types of things credit unions offer, whether it's the fresh start checking accounts or a auto loan that is not requiring credit, a lot of credit unions, especially low income, are minority depository institutions, CDFIs. A lot of them have really been helpful in offering character-based lending, where they listen to the story of what's going on and underwrite based on situations, not just numbers, not just a credit score. So, when we think about sometimes the hesitancy of credit union of saying, well, we're going to have high losses, or it's going to do this or going to do that. I can't think of any other player in the financial services market that is more in alignment with making that help. And if they just start to think about the things that they do every day, they have the tools right in their toolbox. They don't have to invent anything else. It's like everything else they do. And this is a small credit union, you wear everybody's hat. And I think small credit unions are some of the most creative and innovative because they find ways to make a solution. And this is so critical. You think about it's not just the individual themselves, but especially if they have children, or they may have a parent that they're responsible for as well. So it's not just that we're bringing one individual out of abuse. We're bringing another generation. So, as he was saying, it's those threads. And, if we can just simply help that one thread of the financial abuse, thinking how much more that will provide in opportunities, then that's why we're here. And we really want to help credit unions just really unlock those opportunities and potential, and see that they're already doing the work. We just need to set up guardrails on either side to kind of help them along the journey. And, some of the credit unions I've talked to, when we just start talking about what we do as credit unions on a natural conversation, there are a lot of credit unions doing this work, but on a single basis and not collectively. And let's really embrace that sixth principle of collaboration among cooperatives and really start taking a look at this problem, and let's eradicate it and have that solution. So I could sit here and talk about this all day, but at the end of the day, I can't think of a better entity than credit unions to do this work.
No, I agree with you. I think I read 1 in 4, but 1 in 3 is even worse. The first thing I thought about was watching people come through the lobby and just counting them out. No one wants to talk about it. Let's just shove that under the rug and let's just make things look really pretty. Well, that's not reality. Reality is 1 in 3. I mean, it can't get any worse.
You're right. Abuse is a fungus, and it needs 2 things. It needs darkness. It cannot survive in the light, right? And it needs waste. And I'm going to use the word waste and not the other thing. And so it's like, how do we eliminate those 2 things, from the equation? We have multiple stories where, that once that person finds the support and the strength to stand up, that's when, and step into the light, that's when things get better. And I think part of the challenge is that so many people, we have survivors that are partners in law firms. We have survivors that are successful business owners that are, not your, I hate to say typical, statistic that people think about. And those folks are almost more apt to stay in the shadows because, particularly this day and age with social media and everything else, we are all projecting this image of, happiness and success. And so there's a lot of that, I think, that's wrapped up in this. But I think the more people admit or can relate to the fact that they know somebody, recently one of our partners who has been a survivor of domestic violence twice and a survivor of cancer thrice said, this is really the new cancer, in the fact that everybody knows somebody that is either fighting cancer or has fought cancer, whether they've won that battle or not. I really thought about it. I said, wow, that really is a powerful statement that I never really thought of before. This is a pandemic. And the thing that I think from a societal standpoint, and one of our goals, talking about the numbers, is the reality is that we're spending billions of dollars as a society right now, trying to treat the symptoms, and instead of actually investing dollars to reduce the number of cycles, to make it easier for people to step into the light and support. I love the fact that you talk about people walking into your lobby, because when we first started this, we were focused on people out there that we needed to bring in to our credit unions. And we our charitable arm is called Purple Bridges, because bridges, that's a visual that we use in building out our process to get folks from the outside world over to a resource center, then from a resource center over to a credit union, and then creating that loop. But that was a one-way bridge when we first started building it out, because the assumption was they're all out there and we need to bring them in here. And then as we started working with credit unions, we realized they're in here and they need to go out there too. They need to get help at the resource centers from the membership. And then we realized it's not just members, it's also employees of our credit unions. It's also our own staff. It's our own people in our QSO space. And I mean, it's everywhere all at once. And so we started with a very small case, and this has continued to grow and grow and grow because we realize how prevalent it is everywhere all at once. And so, although that can seem daunting, on the positive side of things is that here we are as a credit union movement. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to differentiate ourselves. We're trying to speak to an audience that will breed loyalty, right? For a long-term relationship with our members. And so you think of, how do we do that, especially as smaller credit unions? How do we do that? Because we can't do everything. And so we look at this as, this is an opportunity to do well while doing good, by supporting an initiative that is going to resonate stronger and broader than many other initiatives. Nothing against any of the other good work out there. Keep doing that. But focusing on a niche that really isn't a niche that is as widespread as cancer. And, helping folks, bringing them into your credit union, and by making them financially well, you will gain loyalty, you will gain liquidity, you will gain lifelong members that will support you, that will bring in everybody they know for the long term, because you help them when nobody else would, right? And the thing that Shirley said a few minutes ago, which is so true, is that credit unions have everything they need to get started. And you know what? We'd love to help them. We'd love to tell them, more importantly than everything, what not to do, because we've learned a lot along the way. We've fallen down, we've scun our knees, but that it just takes a little bit of time. You have resource centers right around you that need this help and need this work, and you can get started tomorrow with the tools you already have in your tool chest. You just got to redirect that, member fire, no credit, bad credit loan that you might have now, and you can repurpose it for something else and just make sure you recode it in your system. So anyways, I can also go on and on, as you can see, but we're just very much passionate about building awareness around this, letting people understand that we in this space have a superpower that we can use to help this problem, and do all the things that we're trying to do anyway, all at the same time.
I feel very lucky that the staff that I work with every day, and then the board that supports me and our staff, they feel that our members are more than just a number. And so they encourage us to dig into those stories. And that encourages me as a CEO, because I know that they've given me that leeway that we can really hear those stories and we can make decisions based on those stories. When I teach budgeting at a crisis pregnancy center, I tell them, your self-worth is not your net worth. Why is financial independence such a critical factor in the survivor's ability to leave a situation?
Yeah, I think this touches a little bit on what JT was talking about and cutting those strings or threads of the financial, also the phone. It's an obsession with the abuser to have that control to the point like they have literally stripped away any dignity that the survivor has or did have. And so, when you think about everything that we do every day, like JT was saying, if you don't have a credit score, in most cases, you can't get insurance, or your insurance premiums are going to be high. Or in some cases, in some states, you can't get an apartment without a credit score, without a decent credit score. So, it goes beyond just the matter of having a checking account. It's affecting your ability to have a roof over your head, to have transportation, to have healthcare, to have insurance, to literally have all the basic needs that we need to surround ourselves with to live a day-to-day life. And when all of that is locked up and you have no access to any of that, you are literally a prisoner. And even trying to get away from that, there's always ways for someone to find out what is going on, it's sad to say, whether a phone is tapped or whether they're following the survivor to a credit union or to a bank to make sure that they do exactly what the abuser tells them to do, setting up joint accounts, for example. There's so many things that part of what we're doing here at FiSafe is helping people to understand what compassionate banking is. And understanding that while we do good work, there are some times that we need to take it a step further so that we can ensure that the products, the services, the advice that we're providing, the empathy we're providing is actually the right type and at the right time. And because we don't want to traumatize them twice or three times by asking or doing the wrong thing. So, for example, most financial counselors, if somebody comes in and they've got, issues, the first thing we probably will do is, tell me a little bit about what's going on. Let's do a budget. Well, that may not be the thing that a survivor needs. They need to get out. They may need an emergency $500. So credit unions, you've got QCash, you've got Cash Express, you've got several of these other fintech companies that will provide the opportunity for someone to get a loan almost immediately. Problem is, a lot of the credit unions require that somebody's a member for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So we have to start thinking differently about what are the impediments that we've actually involuntarily put in place that we're preventing ourselves from helping them, and pull back a little bit and say, okay, how do we look at this from the lens of where they're at so that we can just help them get safe? And then we can start helping them rebuild their lives. And is there risk? Of course, there's risk. Yeah, credit unions should be taking risk, right? It's a risk not to take risk, actually. But in this case, it's not just at the end of the day that you're helping somebody save their life. It's also that you're helping them, like you said, especially if they have kids or there's other people involved in their lives, that you're helping that next generation realize that what was going on was wrong, and that there are people, there are companies, there are nonprofits that will help encircle them in that journey. And, credit unions, not that they need to be shouting it from the rooftops, but this is something that credit unions need to tell their communities they're doing. Will there be pushback? I'm sure there will be. We've received pushback. It's the old ante. Oh, this is a great initiative. Just come back to me when you've got somebody else that already started it. we need to stop being that. If you know there's a problem as a credit union, as a person, as a nonprofit, you need to get out there and help be a part of the solution and not more of the problem. So when we talk about this compassionate banking opportunities, it's again coming in and helping train the employees on how to recognize when someone's coming in, or recognizing when you're going through and instead of saying, you must have a driver's license and another form of ID, and they may have had their driver's license taken away. Instead, maybe it's, let's look at what you do have in your possession that can help us get you that account open. So it's a shift of mindset of how we do that. And then when we do the counseling itself, we have to make sure that we're coming in at the right time in those safety plans. And this is why it's so critical to be involved in those domestic violence resource centers, whatever they may be called, women's resource centers, DVRCs. But, when someone's working with a counselor in that environment, oftentimes they are very meticulously trained to recognize, because in some cases, sometimes, unfortunately, the survivor can't immediately get out. There's too many other things. There may be children. There may be other family members that are being threatened. So it's a very fine-tuned process. And to know that the credit union is ready, so when the handoff comes from that DVRC, and we can start integrating the financial pathways with them at the right time, this is where credit unions will be such a critical component of that success. But it goes beyond just regular financial counseling. It really has to be through the lenses of being trauma informed to understand. So, these are the kinds of things that, as we've kind of been digging in and talking to people and talking to other nonprofits and talking to survivors themselves, the things that are very critical in that process, these are the kinds of things that we're developing and enveloping in FiSafe.
Yeah, Shirley, I want to jump on something you just said there, because it's such a great point. Credit unions can get started tomorrow. But one of the things when I guess adopted this initiative and became a steward of it, we had learned a lot the hard way in the first year. And there was a lot of learnings. There was a lot of work to fix some things that looked great on paper that in practice didn't. And part of it was simply because we didn't have the trauma-informed training at the time. And, I realized when I first came in that we had folks at the resource centers that were doing fiduciary work, that were essentially memorizing and going into a system. And I'm like, oh God, my compliance hat just flew onto my head. And I'm like, yikes, danger, Will Robinson. And then on the other side, we had loan officers that were so passionate about this work that they were really doing counseling, real counseling work beyond just the financial counseling side of things. So I had to do a difficult thing where I kind of had to put my referee whistle in and say, guys, everybody needs to, we got to swim back to our strengths, and we have to know where the line is, so that when we have a loan officer or somebody at the credit union that starts to wade into that other lane, that they know how to hand that back over to the professionals that do this work every single day, because there's so much involved in the process. And really, those resource centers act as a guide, and they act as a cheesecloth for us to make sure that these survivors are ready, particularly when there's a loan. And keep in mind, folks, the first thing most people need is just an account. They just need a place to start to squirrel money away. Most folks, when they leave, they don't have a promise to pay right out of the gate, but they need a place to be able to squirrel money away so they can plan their escape. That is very, very common. So it usually starts there, and then the relationships, builds. But you really need that resource center, that local, vetting agent, if you will, because they know if in many cases, if somebody is being sent in by an abuser to avatar and try and pull money to go back to the abuser. They know if it's the abuser themselves. Sometimes the abusers come in and say that they're the victim. And so they have blacklist data files that they bounce stuff off of. It's also about providing resources so that your members can get the help they need outside of what the credit union can do to help, and your staff as well. Those are just really important pieces. So we have put together a model that we know works. And we put together a model that we think creates a village of support around these people to create a long-term, relationship to really help, get them out. And we know we're just getting started. There's so many threads here, but what's really empowering is how many people are coming forward from the fintech space. That's another reason why we call it FiSafe, because the fintech movement has been so incredibly helpful. I mean, we've had chatbots and CRMs and mobile providers spun up and safety apps. And I mean, just an incredible amount of resources where, again, they've got one little piece and they're going, we've got this piece built. And so we're threading all that together to create a really smooth but compliant but safe but impactful process for folks to be able to get the help that they need.
I think it goes right back to look to your left, look to your right. One of the three of you either knows or is. And I think that starts putting it in perspective a little easier. And it's hard. I mean, it's a hard topic to discuss. It's a hard topic to get out there. And even, as a survivor, the fact that most people retain this inside for so long because what if I tell someone, is that going to hurt them? What if I let this go? Am I going to lose my job? What if I tell someone and they take it wrong? We have put a stigma on survivors. Society has, instead of saying, how can we help you? We make them, internalize so much of this to a point that, if we really as credit unions are concerned about financial wellness for all, that's also the mental wellness part of this. And that goes into this and the physical part. So, we're not doctors, obviously, but if we look at that through the lens of something from a financial wellness standpoint, let's take a look a little bit deeper of how we can help. This is a business. I understand that, but it's also an opportunity to do good and people helping people. And, like I said, we have so much heart as an industry, as a movement, that we have so much, unfortunately, compliance burden and things of that. But if we'll just step back a little bit and realize why our credit union was formed in the first place, it was to meet unmet needs in a community that nobody else was meeting. So let's think about that and be that light again to helping these survivors, because you never know who you're sitting by or could be helping and how that's helping the next generation and the next generation.
What can we do to help?
Well, the best place to start is to I always say gather weapons and ammo. What do we have internally that we can utilize? The reality is that and what are the needs? I mean, again, the first thing is freeing the funds, right? And so, how can we take things we've already built in the credit union and do a 3-degree shift? Number one. Number two, how can we learn from others so we don't suffer the same mistakes, right? And so knowing that so much of this is about being trauma informed, talk to those that are doing this work in the space, whether that's us here at FiSafe, whether that's, shout out to Tansley Stearns, Choose the Bear, shout out to Numerica. I mean, there's a lot of credit unions that have started this journey, and lucky for all of us, we all believe in the collaborative and cooperative principles, right, of the credit union space. So we're certainly willing to share that. But then also understand that you have to have a resource center involved for all those reasons. And you really need technology. And that was the big thing for me when I came in and I looked at all the bottlenecks. I said, so much of this is because, like many of our credit unions, particularly our small credit unions, resource centers are woefully overworked, understaffed, underpaid, and undertaxed. And so not having the technology, which is the equalizer, right? Big or small, we took it upon ourselves to go out and source technology, blend it with empathy, and make tempathy. Because we said we need some tempathy. That's what we're going to brew here at FiSafe. We're going to brew tempathy in order to make it easier for survivors, for resource centers, and for credit unions all to work together. It just takes some creativity and looking at the tools that we have. But certainly, I would say reach out to us, fisafe.org, fisafe.org. And we're happy to have a conversation. Ideas are free. It's the effort and the technology that costs money, the time and the technology. But, we are doing everything we can as an organization to try to make this free for resource centers, make it free for credit unions, and do everything we can to help. And our goal at the end of this is that the effort and the money invested in this will be a net zero. It will actually save money to our society because treating the actual disease versus just the symptoms is going to be better. It's going to be better for our police and our first responders and our legal system and everything that's out there. And credit unions will have the best, most impactful example of people helping people that exists today, and then here comes the taxation war.
If you're working for any kind of government agency, you have to have direct deposit. So, I would say really for a credit union to get into this space is to think creatively, think about what those impediments are, look at your policies, look at your procedures, and, see how you can stay within the regulations and compliance, but be more pliable in helping, overcome those barriers. Because if you don't, I don't know that somebody else will down the street. I mean, right now they're hard. It's hard to find financial institutions except payday lenders. We don't want that. And if you actually look at statistics of, unfortunately, where a lot of the domestic violence is situated, it's in the South, it's in areas that have higher minority populations, have higher immigrant populations, and lower income, unfortunately. So these are all areas that credit unions are very capable of helping people. And I know we've got a lot on our plates right now in terms of our entire country. But, if you're just simply looking at this from a strict economic standpoint, helping eradicate this, I'm looking at a statistic right here. This actually comes from Tansley Stearns, Choose the Bear. They've got a statistic here that says 3.1 to 3.6 trillion dollars is the economic burden of the sexual abuse victims and domestic violence survivor population over their lifetimes. Think what that would do to our national debt and could be reinvested in ways that actually help the prevention rather than after the fact. So, just strictly economically, it makes sense.
What is it that you would love to see? And I'd like to hear from both of you, from credit unions, and not just credit unions, but even our members who listen to this. And, what message would we want to leave for them?
I would say for the members of the credit unions, if you're in this situation, don't be afraid. Go to someone that you trust at the credit union and tell them what's going on. Let them work with you, help you. As he was saying, you've just got to find someone that you trust to start that first step. And credit unions need to have that availability. Discretion is extremely important, but you don't know what you don't know. And, so really being that hand reaching out to help them take that first step. So while trust obviously is critical in this situation, establish your credit union. So I'm talking to the credit union. Establish your credit union as one that is trustworthy, that someone can come. Train your employees, because you never know. And, train your employees to understand what financial abuse looks like, those sayings, those habits, the way somebody is looking, to be able, because you may be saving somebody's life that day simply by being observant of body language, of certain words and certain phrases. And, for CEOs, for management, for boards, your duty obviously is to ensure that the credit union is safe and sound and is run for the benefit of the members. But don't be afraid to get into these other areas. Think about if, credit unions were some of the first to give loans to women. Think if credit unions didn't step up, where we would be today. I personally love my husband, but I want to buy my own car. Think about that. Credit unions were some of the first ones to implement ATMs.
My call to action for the movement folks that are listening right now is that we need the brightest, most the boldest impacts of what people helping people means now more than ever. And if we don't start bragging about, respectfully bragging about what makes us different and special and unique, and we don't have the proof, we are going to lose our tax exempt status, and we are going to lose our way. We're going to lose our spirit. So that's number one. Number two, that this is work that you can incorporate into everything else you're doing with a 3-degree shift. And oh, by the way, the path that we can help you blaze isn't just going to help survivors of domestic violence. It's going to help new immigrants. It's going to help human trafficking. It's going to help homeless veterans. It's going to help so many other things that you may be wanting to do as a credit union as well. And I'll also say, most importantly, the call to action, don't do it alone. Don't recreate the wheel. Don't make the same mistakes we've made. Learn, right? And shorten your path so that you can be as successful and as fruitful in these labors as possible. I think that's one of the best things about being in this space, is that there's always others will always pick up the phone and answer your questions. So reach out versus just starting without any help at all. Just feel free to reach out. That's free.
I want to thank you guys so much for being our guests for episode 4 of Make It Make Sense. I know we have given our listeners a lot of good information and a call to action, and I'm really excited for this episode to air. And I just really appreciate you guys. And thank you again. And I hope you have a great day.
You as well.
Thank you for listening. Please visit us at acclaimfcu.org for more valuable resources. Remember to click the follow or subscribe button to make sure you don't miss future episodes.